Chimere is a distant planet. It is defined by waves of life brought from Earth and set free to evolve independently in this new context. The indigenous life of the planet, swarms of microbes called magic by the people who live there, or would harvest Earth organisms and make copies on Chimere. As the asteroid which concluded the Mesozoic never struck Chimere, dinosaurs remain the dominant terrestrial megafauna.
There are many creatures called whales in the known world. However, not all of them belong to the same lineage as true cetaceans we know today. Some are familiar, like the dugongs of the inland sea and tributary rivers. Others are less known to modern viewers, such as the desmostylians, a strange clade of hippo-like marine herbivores. A few, such as the mogao, aren't even mammals, instead being dicynodonts which came from far beyond the known world. Largest of the whales of the inland sea is a mammal, but not of the placental clade we are familiar with today. It is a multituberculate, dominant mammal clade back in the age of dinosaurs, and is the largest of this clade in the known world. Extinction events clear the ecological slate and are often followed by a wide variety of animals undertaking adaptive radiations, taking to new niches, and demonstrating tremendous diversity before a new status quo is established. The oceans are a very popular stadium for these radiations, with many extinctions being the herald for terrestrial tetrapods taking to the water. Mammals have independently evolved into aquatic clades many times in the Cenozoic, with several independent lineages of carnivoran, sirenian, the extinct desmostylians, and ungulates which gave rise to the tremendous diversity of modern cetaceans, all taking to the water in many cases not long after the Cretaceous extinction made the abundance of niches available. The dynastic extinction in Kaimere had a similar impact. While the known world became generally dominated by familiar clades being harvested already large and competitive, more insular regions, such as the waters north of the equator, and the interior seaway of Kairul, had many other clades develop their own tetrapod contenders for the newly available niches. In the interior seaway of Kairul, the dynastic extinction wiped out all the giants of its time. A range of plesiosaurs and marine crocodile archosaurs had ruled these waters and perished as the competitive array of sea monsters both old and new. One of these new clades was the plectocetids, the spur whales. Like true cetaceans, their ancestors started out as semi-aquatic predators, not unlike crocodiles, and it took to open waters as opportunities presented themselves. It did not take long for them to transition from an otter-like paddler to a tail-propelled clade. These plectocetids diversified into a wide range of niches, with the dolphin-like fish specialists, durophagous shell breakers, like the sea beavers who independently took to the sea, and a variety of omnivores which sifted the sediment, feeding on the seagrass or other marine plants, along with benthic invertebrates and fish. It was from this clade that the genus Thylacochorus evolved, with several modern species recorded in the interior seaway of Kairul. At some point, perhaps all descending from a few small pods, a group of these whale analogues left the interior seaway. Often the waters at the mouth of this seaway are quite cold compared to the interior, which is part of why there is so much endemism. They likely followed the eastbound current from the Great Kalin Sea or Western Arvel, and then spread throughout the known world. As they all form a single species today and seem to have spread a little over 1 million years ago based on fossil and genetic studies showing a bottleneck, it is assumed that this was a fairly recent migration, perhaps in the aftermath of the Pleistocene Asian harvest when seasonality and global temperatures spiked, perhaps allowing for an opening in the seaway. An alternative hypothesis is that they came much earlier and spread out from a small population in the aftermath of the end-anchored period extinction during the biota turnover. Whatever their origins, the Kaimeran Leviathan is a common sight in the warm waters of the known world today. They have very little blubber and thick skin, so don't do terribly well in open water, although they do better at it than, say, Desmostylians, some Sirenians, and the Kurojaku. They also avoid the cold, and only the size of adults can protect them, so visitation to the plentiful sediments of the Great Clean Sea is really only viable to them in the summer. There's not much seagrass in the Great Clean Sea, but they feed on kelp and benthic fauna, which are present in abundance. This adaptation to heat does allow them to winter in the warmest reaches of the inland sea, where few cetaceans over a ton can comfortably endure. The Leviathan, called Bilaruk by the Kenterim who most often encounter them, can get massive thanks to bulk feeding on highly diverse diet. Their massive gut can process a lot of food. They have a base of seagrass which they uproot with long tusks and draw back with barbed tongues to be shredded by the blade-like premolars. A baleen analog, thought to be derived from keratinized skin, forms their upper jaw, allowing them to filter out sediment from the seagrass, roots, and any benthic fauna hiding within. This fairly damaging feeding method means pods can't get too large or remain in one place for too long. Most groups comprise 3 to 12 related females and their calves. Calves are around 3 meters at birth. Cows often reach 15 meters and don't grow much after sexual maturity. Males, on the other hand, tend to be solitary, though younger males will often form bachelor pods and sometimes follow an older male around. Bulls reach sexual maturity at around 6 years of age, only a little bit longer than the 15-meter mature cows, yet they continue growing. By 10 years of age, they have plateaued at around 20 to 22 meters, though occasionally bulls can get several meters longer. Bulls also can be diagnosed by having thicker hide in their trunks for protection and an overall more robust build. Cows are often around 30 to 35 tons, and bulls can easily double that. Lacking much blubber means they are a lot lighter in proportion to the whales of similar dimensions. Though bulls are often said to have longer tusks, in proportion it's not usually that dramatic of an increase, likely since they use them on a daily basis to uproot grass. Though they come from a pouched lineage, multi-pouches are more for carrying developed young, and leviathans have lost the pouch altogether, likely as an aquatic adaptation as their calves are born able to swim. Most males and females can be quite violent with others of the same sex, and their courtship also involves a lot of biting. When bulls compete, they employ their venomous spurs to temporarily sterilize their opponent so they can't reproduce for a few hours to several days due to the pelvic region swelling. The spurs also swell the pelvic region of the female, effectively preventing other males from copulating for a similar period of time. The spurs usually hold on and inject above the pelvis so as not to inhibit defecation. Inexperienced younger males may struggle with this, but it's usually older males who mate anyway, so this rarely occurs. The dominant species of seagrass can grow extremely quickly. In most grazers, only the tops are eaten, enabling faster regrowth and recovery. The uprooting of Bilaruk can be destructive and destabilize seagrass patches, however. The seeds usually survive digestion, and dung of Bilaruk are often naturally nutritious foundations for new patches to grow, so it's not as if these grazers only have a destructive influence on their habitat. Being free swimmers means Bilaruk often prefer grazing in deeper waters than the sloths and Desmostylians, which are far more abundant, and their size means they are safer than Sirenians in the same zone. Indeed, their size means they often have an entourage of dugong relying upon their presence and massive protective instincts to drive away wolverine sharks and other threats. Seagrass rarely grows in waters deep enough for a large megalodon or motomazor, though they occasionally have to keep an eye out. However, there is one predator that lives in the same habitat, and indeed sometimes specialize in Bilaruk, the Kurajaku. These megaraptorans have very thick skin, dense bones, barely any body fat, and air sacs which can compress when they dive, so can't reliably swim in open water. They are sinkers. However, they can run fast along the substrate due to negative buoyancy and powerful caudofathomoralis muscles, connecting short and laterally compressed, drag-reducing legs and broad tails. Oiled feathers provide camouflage, enabling them to get close to their prey. Though Bilaruk have decent eyesight, they often rely on an extremely potent sense of smell to detect food and predators as they inhale toward the surface. Kurajaku also have very keen senses of smell and sight, often approaching downwind, so the whales don't smell them when they come up for air. The tusks, which extend up to 2 meters from the jaws of Bilaruk, can be potent weapons, great for piercing Kurajaku's thick skin. Their barnacled snouts also make excellent bludgeoning weapons, and their bodies are extremely muscular so can pivot and strike with great force. Their spurs are also painful backup weapons in a brawl. However, an experienced Kurajaku can run alongside them while feeding. If they bite the back of the neck and keep the belly facing away, the whale is basically defenseless, and the megaraptoran can kill by stabbing into the chest with their own long, powerful claws. Both animals are extremely muscular, but even the air sacs compressed, the theropod has superior endurance, and so dense that they can basically sit still and let the struggling sea monster drown itself in the effort. This is when pods of Leviathan can be of great benefit. The megaraptoran is a formidable predator and unmatched in a brawl, but itself can be fairly vulnerable in a grapple. As long as the pod doesn't scatter, they can land debilitating bites on the back half of the megaraptoran, where they would be hard-pressed to turn and retaliate. Even if it could safely disengage, megaraptoran torsos are very rigid to keep them accurate in a charge, so biting their flanks is a safe countermeasure, and experienced leviathans know this. They aren't as intelligent as a lot of true whales, but they are among the smartest of the multituberculates, and this sort of coordinated defense has protected them well. Even so, Leviathan can make up a majority of some Kurajaku individuals' diets. With enough experience, they can land a quick kill, then fall back to shallower waters where they can not be easily outmaneuvered by a pod. They also know bulls will be easier to kill in the mating season. True, their testosterone spikes as they fight one another, but that doesn't matter how hard you fight once you're in a secure hold, and no other bulls are likely to come to their rescue. At the end of the day, the Kurajaku just took out some of the competition, and there's no love lost there. Kurajaku are also drawn to the sounds of bulls fighting during the mating season, as the loser is often an easy kill. Bachelor groups will often protect their own outside the mating season, so Kurajaku are a bit more cautious then. As one might expect, these giants play an important role in the ecosystem of the inland sea. Their uprooting method of grazing frees up space for reefs to grow and new species of seagrass to have a chance, fostering more biodiversity than would occur if it was just the Sirenian and sloths grazing off the top. Their movement also transfers nutrients from the summer range to a more productive north into the inland sea, further nourishing this habitat. In death, it also provides an abundance for scavengers. Their ferocity makes them an unsurprising symbol of virility and power to the seafaring peoples of the known world. Cheers to Garrick for sponsoring this episode. Bilaruk has sponsored a lot of topics in the coming months, for which I am extremely excited to cover. The Bilaruk has gone through perhaps the most substantial redesign of any Kaimeran creature, at least since I took the project public. In its earliest conception, it was a multituberculate or some other non-therian mammal specialized as a seagrass grazer. I had envisioned them having an asymmetrical cranial anatomy, built to hang low and graze not unlike a hedge trimmer. At the end of the day, this design wouldn't really work for an animal capable of long migration from Kairul's interior seaway, so I'll need to replace the basic concept at some point, part of why I never fully illustrated them in the introduction in the first Megaraptorad episode. I know I wanted to keep it a multituberculate, but it would need to be something a bit more reasonable to cross an open seaway. Would still be a grazer, but a different build would be called for. Then came the announcement of Paperback last year, a hulking relative of Basilosaurus which seemed likely to be a big, dense, benthic feeder. Exaggerated and controversial estimates be damned, I knew this was more or less what I was envisioning. Paperback itself would of course not be a candidate for Chimere, as it was 7 to 10 million years before even the Oligocene harvest. However, as a cetacean living around 12 million years after the first stem cetaceans began taking to water, it was a perfect template for the sort of body plan a seagoing multi might reach for. The old design will likely be revisited, but Bilaruk is a Kentering word, so obviously wouldn't make sense for the old design now restricted to the Kairulan Seaway. I'm very happy with this revision and don't expect it will change. Someday I will develop more of their clade, but that's an adventure for the Kairulan Seaway and its weird endemic fauna down the road. Thanks again to Garrick, to my Patreon patrons for your support, and thank you so much for watching. Cheers, folks!